goes without saying that beating a dead horse involving a certain Bayonetta 3 and the entirety of the fucking plot is not necessarily stale, but it's become a meme at this point. So in an effort to, I don't know, be constructive or utilize and capitalize on this random growth burst I've had that I don't even fucking understand fully myself, because I'm pretty sure that I only speak English, technically partially French, but for some reason there's a lot of people from different places all automatically just finding my stuff now. I don't know what I did, but I'm not gonna complain about it, you know? So let me be positive or try to be constructive when I criticize, in the case of Bayonetta 3. Now, I'm sure you've seen videos like Exile, as well as many other people on social media and of course YouTube, who went out of their way to basically state why there's a problem. Johto, Johnny, and Exile did the best jobs as far as I'm concerned, so I won't bore you too much with that. Instead, I'm gonna go down the complaint list, the gripe list, and I'm gonna try to fix them. Essentially, this is a what if Bayonetta 3 director's cut type of video, and I think it's the only one of its type, so holy shit, I did something Raccoon hasn't done. That's never going to happen again. First and foremost, let's start off with the weaponry. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying the weapons in Bayonetta 3 are terrible or don't live up to hype/expectations of previous titles. And I know it's in my nature to compare everything to Sci-Fung, but in this one instance, I'm not going to do that. So, the biggest thing I would fix with the weaponry is how you receive them. And on top of how you receive them, the fact that a previous Bayonetta utilizes them first. I'm not really a fan of that. That entire approach should be completely different. Essentially what I would do is have designated enemies in every single area, or rather stage, hold a piece of a fragment. We'll say up to mission 10. Some of the enemies are hidden, some of them are boss related, some of them have more than one piece. And as long as you find them and beat them, you get that fragment of the LP and you send it back to Rodin. That's how it should be done, because that means that I actually have to work for it. That adds a level of replayability. Yes, a lot of people can cheat the system and just go look it up on the strategy guide. You have to look at this as if someone's playing the game essentially naked. Also, secondary unlockable weapons via difficulty modes and secret mission. 3, and I mean only 3, should be in there. I would return the original combat system of being able to mix and match the weapons that are on your feet versus on your hands. They got a little bit more dynamic with it in case of Bayonetta 1. There are some weapons that can only be with hands, some that can only be with feet. They tried to rectify that with 2, but they still ended up going back to that system of occasionally making weapons that can only be utilized on your feet and never on your hands. I'm okay with that. Also, the whole Bayonetta's dying to get your weapon, nah. I would rather you can get their second weapon in a special cutscene that triggers once you beat the boss of the area where you meet them, if you've already got your dimensions version of that weapon. Now for the next playable character, Viola. Let's balance. Balance that out a little bit. First and foremost, that giant tank missile launching thing, ridiculous weapon that Bayonetta just gets handed to her by Rodin. Yeah, fuck that. Give it to Viola. So that way she has a long range and a close range weapon. And of the close range weapons and long range weapons, for most people I know, that ugly little bastard was one of the first things to never get used and be put in the proverbial, this is the thing I'm never really going to care about, so let's let it collect dust weapons that are common in Devil May Cry and the Bayonetta series. Everybody's got one. Well, I've got like 3, but it's a little bit too embarrassing to talk about. I would also potentially like to give her the option later on in the game, or after beating the original difficulty, of allowing Viola to utilize Bayonetta's weapons. However, she obviously controls them different, or she blends them with the sword. But this would be something that is given to you as a reward for completing hard mode. I would also like to give her certain accessories that, you know, alter her blocking ability. If I can give her the ability to guard like Bayonetta or Bayonetta style permanently and use that button for something else, or maybe a secondary or an EX move, I'm all for it. Generally speaking, Viola should have had her own weapon list. Also, because you know I'm gonna bring it up, give her ass Sifong. If you're not gonna give it to Bayonetta no more, let the new girl try it out. Give her Sifong. You know, 4 weapons, you ain't killing nobody, you ain't hurt nobody with that. Now for the skills. The skills weren't a bad idea. I like where they were trying to go with them. They essentially made them more exotic than they did in Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2. And that's a good idea. They added more without adding too much. That's the way I look at it when it comes to the skills. But here's where it becomes too much. Why do I have to unlock the same skills on different weapons 6-7 times over? That is not hyperbole or an exaggeration or posturing. Damn! Well, you did it in Devil May Cry. Motherfucker, if I didn't like it there, what makes you think I'm gonna like it here? You silly bitch. Look, you had the right idea, but if you want to increase longevity of play, get people to try to build up bigger scores, use those points, here's how you should have handled it. Have special techniques that go for each weapon and the summon mode of each weapon. Let those stay. But once I unlock my dashing move, my lunging move, my aerial, my launchers, all those essential basics, the shooting ones, they should just be on every weapon unless it doesn't have a shooting function. And then let me do the same thing for Viola, and I guess maybe John, but I want John and Bayonetta stuff to kind of be parable. It's been like that the whole time, why change it the hell now? Also, since Viola has less weapons starting, and throughout the whole fucking game, why not make it so Viola has more literal skills that she can unlock and combo extenders from hers, instead of just, you know, doing the duplicate stuff. I like that. Let's do that system. The third thing on my list, character usage. Hey, listen. We all know Viola was in the game more than anybody wanted her to be once we got to know her. And we all know John was basically an afterthought. I literally feel like when they were writing the story, they saw somebody say, I wonder what John's gonna do in this game, when they were already doing production and were like, holy shit, we forgot about John. Isn't that Kamiya's favorite character? Yeah, let's make her do minigame shit. Yeah, that's a smart idea. No, sweetie. No, everything that John did, Viola could have done. They got to keep the comical aspect of Viola trying to look cool and being a total klutz. I wouldn't have had a problem with it. They didn't make me any hard promises with John, they never do. I usually make assumptions and I usually get screwed, but there's usually a silver lining. Not in this case. Example, Bayonetta 1, palette swap, you can play John. Throughout the whole game, weapons even come out looking different. Different summon demons. Bayonetta 2, you can play John. She has her own lines, all that jazz. She replaces Bayonetta in the cutscenes where Bayonetta would be, so essentially you can see 2 Johns on screen at once. I thought that once you rescue John, I would be able to fight with stages of Bayonetta in hell and John's body back up in the real world, helping with the stabilization from that location. It just makes sense. I feel like it was a missed opportunity, but I'm not that mad about it. Why? Because John was still important to the story. She was still integral in some way, and they didn't bullshit us by giving us 3 or 4 different John fights or any boss fights habitually over and over again, where they pretty much did the same thing but with one slight alteration. Yes, I know Lopter technically shows up, but hey look, those are completely different types of fights every single time he showed up, and they properly escalated a lot better than the stuff with John. Fun fact, before the game came out, I used to always call her Gienna. It just feels more feminine than John. Viola. Yeah, I already said what I want. Switch her presence with John. Have John maybe do 4 stages, Bayonetta do the rest, and they combine on 2 or 3 stages nearing the end of the game. One person has to take out, well, the main bad guy, and the other one has to stop crazy version of Luca from fucking everything up. Yes, that's right. I'm completely removing the love, and I'm completely removing Fairy King Luca.
He heating up. What's he doing? He heating up. He heating up. No.
Luca is just Luca. He's not the love of Bayonetta's life. Bayonetta, on a bad day, bisexual. But if she is, it's because her designers are essentially perverts. But essentially, until otherwise confirmed, is heterosexual. I wouldn't care if she fell in love with Rodin. By the way, that child they would have would be disturbingly scary and powerful. I don't want to think about it. That's essentially it when it comes to that. John's presence was sorely missed. There should have been places and times where there could have been co-op options where you can both be on screen at once. I don't care if it's just an AI or maybe, you know, a mini game mode like in Bayonetta 2. Yes, I still miss it. I love the co-op. I would have preferred that. But no, we didn't get that. And Viola can go look for that guy. She can even be the one that gets stabbed in the back, literally. She earned it. Wow, don't you think you're being a little bit too harsh on Viola's ex? No, I don't. God of destructions feared not destruction itself. We make it. Okay, now for this little section real quick, in X Factors, an unusual label, but let me tell you why I called it that. This is essentially where I'm going to put guest appearances, but since I don't know who's all going to show up or who's going to contribute anything, I am going to label it X Factor. So take it away, other people that chose to help me out with this video, and that's all from the Bayo crew. And lastly, the part that'll take the longest, but I spent about a week compressing it so I can avoid it taking the longest, the god-awful story. First and foremost, even the world of video games is not immune to a 3rd-act structure or 3-act structure. However, we have a little bit more leeway. We can do a 4-act and get away with it, or we can have an A plot and B plot that both have their own 1, 2, 3-act structure. Here's what I'm thinking. Don't change the opening. That whole entire from beginning to first stage, keeping that. Here's where we get differentiation. Viola immediately goes to find the professor, whom I will call Professor Singularity, because you know he's both the good guy and a bad guy, but Professor Singularity just seems like accurate. But Viola, being the klutz as she is, accidentally triggers an alarm, whether it's silent or out loud, and because of this, he essentially puts up a bunch of defenses, not knowing that Viola is there as an ally and potentially to help them. You know, up until this point, we don't know how far along they are in the interdimensional travel portion of this adventure. While that's going on, John goes to Chai-Netta's world, and Bayonetta goes to Shinjuku Netta's world. Now, some of the same beats do happen. They do die. But what happens is, you only get a fragment of the weapon. It's been broken and busted to pieces. We'll just say the bigger homunculus did it. So that way, you know, counts as a decent boss fight, or maybe a secret boss and mini boss fights. However, you both bring back fragments to Rodan. The fragments you brought back are mystically enchanted by Rodan to now have the ability to detect pieces of itself throughout the dimensions. This is when Rodan reveals that there's only one of himself, but he needs their help as much as they need his help to literally fix those weapons. Hence why, for this point in time, Rodan is not invested into the actual combat and the stages, because Rodan has to stop those weapons from interdimensionally dematerializing, because not only does he want to work with them for himself, he wants to help Bayonetta and John get this stuff straight so they could potentially use those weapons to help out in the, you know, ongoing fights. So now we have a canonical reason why Rodan is not assisting. Also, this helps the people who do not have access to the internet necessarily. So they can go play as one of the characters in any of those stages that they're on, and they can go around the stage and see if there's a vibration system or an on-screen indicator beacon going off, letting them know, hey, oh snap, guess what? You might find another piece of a weapon. But because the game is the game, it doesn't just detect the weapon pieces that it goes to, it can also detect weapon pieces that go to a weapon that the other character might be using. So essentially, Bayonetta is using a set amount of weapons, and John is using a set amount of weapons. So we stop the overlap on the weapon wheel immediately. Eventually, you get a complete weapon. Rodan says he can now make current dimension version of the weapon. So now you got the choice of your loadouts. Bayonetta can have her weapon, foot in hand, or you can choose to let John utilize one until Rodan can quote unquote get enough halos to make a dimensional duplicate. So you can still get the hand and foot option, but like last time, you got to work for it if you want both characters to be able to do it. And because, you know, John's motifs coloring is always different, the alternate dimension duplicate or current dimension duplicate coloration and those versions are exclusive to John. So that way, boom, we've also increased the replayability, because now you got to use all of your item material to potentially make this stuff. And I like that. Now on to the Viola section of, so Viola's missions, as mentioned, are different. I feel in her missions, she should be partially aided by Enzo and Luca. Enzo can be a distraction to help get in the buildings, or Enzo can be a temporary item or assist call out, and you can utilize him to make sure your alert value doesn't dramatically increase if you screw up. But you have a limited amount of times of using Enzo, because if you use him too much, they quote unquote arrest him and they try to send him to go get converted into the homunculus, and you have to make sure that doesn't happen or you get a game over. Luca, on the other hand, if you meet up with him or you find special Luca notes throughout the stage, Luca helps you get a map layout of the area, tells you where certain hidden items and secrets are, and he can even be used to help find fragments to weapons that go to Bayonettas and Johns you never even met, or they can go to other Violas that are only spoken about, never seen in the game. Her first weapon being a Nodachi. And no, she doesn't dual wield. But the Nodachi has the ability to send out water waves. You swing it enough times and there's enemies in the area, they get pushed back by a tidal wave, or they can slip and fall, putting them in a temporary stun state so you can better focus on one enemy. However, you know, the bigger and heavier the enemy, the less that's gonna work. Really cool. Really fucking cool. Let's say we get to about the halfway point of the game. At this point, Singularity is essentially letting you know, oh, I'm gonna take out all the Bayonettas, specifically you. Now, nobody knows why. Rodon has a theory, but no one truly knows why, except for Luca. But when Luca tries to dial in, he's found out why. They hear a lot of loud noises and whatnot going on, and they go try to find Luca because Enzo knew where his last location was. Viola's still gonna do her second mission, so she's still out of this bitch. So it's Enzo chauffeuring, and everybody else in the back seat. You get on site, let's call it, we'll say you're at Paris now, so you get to Paris a lot earlier. I kind of like that stage. And you see that there's a wolf rampaging, beating the crap out of everything, and there's an unconscious Luca with holes in his body, slash marks. Now, you choose who's gonna fight that boss. So you choose either John or Bayonetta, and the other person is trying to use their magic abilities to keep him alive long enough to open up a new portal for Rodon. Because we don't actually know what the process is for opening Rodon's portals when it's not Rodon coming through them. So Rodon's working on a chant to get him over there, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, halfway through the fight, boom, that Luca turns into a wolf. So now we're fighting blue Luca Wolf and red Luca Wolf. But blue Luca Wolf essentially can talk. And you got to get him to calm down or you beat him. And depending on which option you choose, that'll have different alterations to the story, but not by a dramatic amount. So after this stage is over, everyone returns. Luca's unconscious. Rodon decides to keep him in a special chain imprisonment. He's going to try figuring out what's going on with him once he's more conscious. Enzo's going to stick around too, because now he's mad and sad that not only did he lose his wife and his daughter and kids, but he also lost his car because the wolves fucked up the car. So y'all go back to what y'all doing. Dimensional hopping, all that jazz. And then you go back to the one place we all thought we were always going to go. You go back to a dimension that is having the Vigrid war between the Lumen Sages and the Umbran Witches. And both John and Bayo potentially experience PTSD. Bayonetta, wanting to stay on mission, doesn't want to interfere. But John does want to interfere. So in this particular stage you're playing as John, you're not coming back to Bayonetta till the end or till the boss fight. John watches Rosa die. John gets the Tonfa weapon from Rosa. Now she's even more angry because she's remembering how many people she lost. We're having flashbacks to how she grew up. Because remember, John grew up completely different from Bayonetta. She was a wanted child, she was royalty, and almost nobody could really fuck with her. So she starts seeing old friends, old teachers that she doesn't know, but she does know, dying left and right. And then she spots another wolf, much like Luca. And she just goes, "Did you do this?" And she just decides she's going to kill this. But again, depending on if you spare that wolf or kill that wolf, different things happen. You kill the wolf, you get a wolf-based weapon. You give it to Viola. You spare the wolf, well, we'll save that for the end. Now, speed forward to the last 3 stages. You realize that Viola's been killed, and you realize that, oh shit, we sent her to find somebody who already knew what we were going to try to do, and he needed us where he needed us. And Rodon teleports in with Luca because both of them have figured it out. Because Luca has some weird ability where Lucas are psychokinetically linked. We'll just call it psychokinetic link because Luca don't know magic shit. So whenever any Luca figures out how to hop a dimension, whatever Luca's in the area, they inherit some traits from. They inherited Wolf Luca from an area where he was a magical person. He lived in a forest and he was essentially a werewolf. He stayed in the forest because he didn't want anyone to find out he had become, you know, more than a man, because werewolves were hunted and where he's from. That Luca explains everything. He also explains that that he's capable of fusing. He learned how to do it when he accidentally killed one of his others. That Luca calls forth any other Luca that'll listen to his voice, because you know Lucas kept saying they hear his voice. Rodon opens some interdimensional portal, and he just says, hopefully your dimension breaking and dimension shattering material will work with my demon magic or angelic magic, so we can make it so anybody who hears this, heaven, hell, earth, or purgatorial, paradiso, inferno, whatever version of Lucas that can hear this will come together and help us out. So now we get a super Luca, and instead of fighting on a red version of that giant witch Madama Butterfly, we have a super Luca wolf, we have John, and we have Bayonetta and Rodon all fighting for the next 3 stages. The first stage is a literal stage. Dimensions are coming together and smashing apart. You basically have to keep fighting until you reach some, teleportation device that'll get you onto the moon or space, whatever, and you all get there. But when you get there, the first thing that happens is Professor immediately realizes Rodon is a fucking threat. So he tries to take him out, but when he realizes that Rodon exists infinitely and he is only one, he realizes, okay, I have to try something different for you. Separates him from the group, and then he just literally throws him back onto the earth. Rodon basically says, don't think I won't be back. He tries to transform, he shoots his wings off. Rodon shoots a beam at him, which weakens him a little bit, while John is casting a spell to make sure they can breathe, on the moon, because it's the moon. So she's pretty much out of the entire fight. So it's Bayonetta and Super Wolf Luca. Penultimate stage. We go back to Viola, who's chilling with Enzo inside Rodon's bar. Rodon teleported himself, but he crashed so hard he made a giant dust cloud. And he says, I didn't want to have to do this, but we need all hands on deck. Then you see him slash himself, and he pour a little bit of blood into Viola's corpse. And then she opens her eyes, scene fades to black. We go back to Bayonetta and John. They're getting their asses beat. They are like legitimately losing. But this time, it's a little bit different. Professor gets bored with them, realizing, oh wait, you hoes have no way of getting off the moon. Well, enjoy each other's company for the next 500 years or until you run out of oxygen. Toodaloo. And he teleports away to go enact his plan where, he needed to. He wanted to basically get all energy from all dimensions into that one point. He's interrupted. Rodon teleports back up there. They don't know how much time has passed, and Viola's there with them. Viola says, I'm helping out. They're like, how are you alive? Rodon explains the situation, and she got her new devil trigger fairy form thingy-mabob. They all decide we need to do different things to try to stop him. And then they notice all of a sudden that the energy that was coming towards the planet stopped. They don't know what stopped it, but they figured this may be the best time to strike. It's Bayonetta 1 and Bayonetta 2 dimension characters temporarily stalling him, which is why he can't concentrate all the energy. But he's annoyed that he can't seem to hurt them, and they do more damage than every other Bayonetta he's come across. And they explain to him, well, we know who you are and what you are. We met a child named Viola who was jumping through time, not dimensions, and told us what you're trying to do. And because we met her, we went together and we decided we were going to get things that could potentially stop. However, all of that material was essentially an inferno, and it took the great sacrifice of a lot of demons, including the ruler of Inferno, to get these 2 particular weapons that they both have. Because they went and got, the King of Inferno weapon, the Queen of Inferno weapon from their dimensions, and, make them weapons whatever you want them to be. They can look like whatever the fuck you feel like. So, eventually, the whole squad gets down there, and then both the Bayonettas recognize Rodon. They say, oh, hey, Rodon. Like, how do you know Rodon? How do you know Rodon? And then John's like, one day you're going to have to explain to us what exactly you are. They all start fighting. The Bayonettas realize they can sync up. Rodon gets an idea. He calls for the John who was fighting in the other Bayonetta's dimension. He can do this because once he has been someplace before, dimensional wise, he can immediately go back there. He just looked for their Umbran energy and went to find them. So he's going for the first part of the fight, or the first HP bar. Comes back with them, tells, hey, you two John, do that whole fusion thing. So now we got sextuple witches, and, Professor is legitimately losing. But he starts using time manipulation. Now that's when Rodon comes in, because Rodon is immune to the ravages and effects of time manipulation. He's immune to any form of time manipulation as long as it's not magic based. So that way we have a canonical reason why he still gets hurt by time manipulation involving the witches. So he starts just beating the fuck out of him, so he can't do that no more. So that gives the Bayonettas time to summon out the ultimate Shin demons. They're basically trying to make a Shin version of Sheba from the first game, if you remember her during the final sequence. Now, This one does a little bit different. It compresses itself down to where it's the size of an actual human, a 6'2" woman. And it actually just starts fighting the professor along with Rodin, transformed into his new Devil Trigger state. Viola's jumping in, and it's just one giant cutscene at that point. But Professor had one final trick up his sleeve. He expels all the energy of all the other professors who think like him, and they materialize. They look like duplicates, but with slight alterations. And they each individually fight all of the characters. One for Viola, one for Wolf Luca, one for Rodin, one for Triple John, one for Triple Netta, and they all win. But they realize as long as one remains or has enough time to heal, they can respawn infinitely. So they have to figure out what to do with this thing once they, kill it for the umpteenth time. And that's when we get the one thing that we wanted: actual plot development and character development. So the Bayonetta split up, and two of them are deciding to sacrifice themselves to boost up one Bayonetta in a different way. Instead of boosting up the magical power, they're boosting up their ability to perform physically and attack stupid hard. So they're making one Bayonetta, instead of having enhanced magical power and enhanced summoning power, they're giving her enhanced physical power. Basically doing the invert. Instead of giving demons more power, she's getting more power from witches as blood sacrifice. It's a forbidden technique that witches are only supposed to do in the event that they are under an extreme crisis and they need at least one person to survive in a group where no one can. And they let themselves die. But when they do that, Daddy shows up. Yes, good old Crispin Freeman Daddy shows up. Balter shows up because he couldn't find out what was causing any of the stuff that was going on. He was fighting his own war. But he heard from the angels in Paradiso, hey, there's two versions of your daughter who came from the same dimension who are ascending to Paradiso instead of going to hell. They make the contract, they go to hell. But these Bayonettas contract are in a different dimension. So we'll use that as our little loophole. He comes down, has no idea what's going on. They basically explain, look, this is your kid from the future, because he doesn't understand why the Cerezas he saw look like grown adults. This guy's causing every single problem. You need to help us fight. So he essentially calls out every single summon he has. He can't move, and everyone just beats him into a bloody ass pulp. But Rodin decides to trap him in an interdimensional space because they acknowledged that they couldn't kill him. He wasn't stronger than them at the end because they kept weakening him, but they acknowledged that they couldn't kill Professor. So they decided to keep him in a micro dimension that is nothing but blackness and darkness, a space in between dimensions, until they can figure out what to do with him. But Viola goes in there after them because she knows something the rest of us don't, and they don't know what they did. But the problem now is, since Rodin sealed it, no one else can follow. Viola goes in because Viola knows that as long as this guy has one of the interdimensional travel devices, he can figure out a way, or potentially figure out a way to get out. Because there's a difference between trying to engineer technology from scratch and trying to engineer technology because you physically have it with you at the time and you might be able to figure something out. So essentially, she's not even trying to kill him. She's trying to destroy the device, and even if she can't, she'd rather die trying. So Viola does essentially become a hero. When she gets out, all the dimensions start repairing themselves. So none of the Bayonettas, none of the Lucas, none of the Rodins and Lopter, they don't know if she survives when she goes back, or if she has time to get to a hospital, someone can help her heal. Because when everyone goes back, they don't go back where they essentially were teleported from. They go back in the dimensional equivalent of the space they're at. So she could have ended up in a desert. She could have ended up in Paradiso or Purgatorio. She could have ended up in the New York Bay. And Bayonetta does not fall in love with Luca magically. And then right after the credits roll, instead of a fucking pointless pole dance, John and Bayonetta sit down at Rodin's bar with Luca with a big giant book. And he moves his head and he says, "The Book of Rodin." And they ask Rodin, "What are you?" And then right before he tells us, fade to black. That's how I would fix things. I'd love to hear you guys' comments. If people want to make reactions to this, feel free.